This is Bumpbot. He is a firm supporter of the Dippy Egg Gang. Are you? Hello everybody. A style of game that I sort of ignored as a kid just because I didn't have access to it has been the RPG genre. I mean, it's a genre I'm really fond of today, but I feel like I should get started at the beginning and should dive into the beginning of the greatest RPG series of all time. Dragon Quest. I mean, how can you not love Dragon Quest? It has dragons, it has quests, it has everything. And it's such a beautiful series that still goes on today with all sorts of crazy sequels and remakes and oddities, and it's just beautiful. So I acquired Dragon Quest for the Famicom due to the fact that it's literally a $1 game, but unfortunately I didn't put into the equation that it's an RPG and thusly too text-heavy for me to actually play without a comprehensive understanding of Japanese. Thankfully, this game did get a North American release, complete with much less charming artwork. The game took a bit to get to North America, more than 3 years in fact. Dragon Quest III was already out in Japan by the time this game came out in North America for perspective. The game didn't sell great, so Nintendo resorted to giving them away to Nintendo Power subscribers, which I'm sure I would have been hyped for had I not only been 1 year old when that happened. They renamed the game Dragon Warrior due to some tabletop game out there being called Dragon Quest already, a title that stuck with this series until 2005. I should also add that in addition to the altered box art, the title screen is way more generic than it was previously. However, the sprites of the characters look a million times better, and the concept of character animations moving in separate directions was introduced. So, I turn on the game and I'm greeted by this lovely little tune. I hope you like it because this series has been using this song for almost 35 years now. And honestly, the same can be said about the majority of the rest of the music in the game. You begin the game and then you tell them what your name is, standard stuff for RPGs, and you find yourself in a throne room where the king explains to you that you're the descendant of an old hero named Erdrick, and that, much like him, you must bring peace to the land. Just a forewarning, all the dialogue in this game is in ye olde English, but it's honestly kind of charming, in my opinion. So, your goal is, as I just stated, to bring peace to the land, and then you also gotta save the princess. I mean, this is a video game after all. Time to just exit the room, and I can't. This is the first RPG of its kind, and as such, automatically going down the stairs hasn't been invented yet. Instead, you need to use the stairs command. Yeah, the stairs command. Not sure why, in retrospect, this is a thing. Sure, it's primitive programming, no doubt, as you have commands for doors and whatnot as well, but you can enter towns and such just by walking into them, no problem. But hey, we got the almighty stairs command, let's roll with it. After you leave the castle, there's a town very close by known as Brecconary. I probably butchered that. This is where you get your first weapon. As you go on, you'll gradually upgrade these to better weapons and armor, but let's not get ahead of ourselves. Every town also has an inn that you can stay at to recover all your health. These cost gold, and as you get to further towns, they become more and more expensive. Throughout my playthrough, I typically opted to just go back to Brecconary due to the fact that it's 6 gold as opposed to the much higher cost at all these other joints, sometimes going as high as 100 gold. Absolute highway robbery. Make sure, however, to also return to the castle frequently to save your game. The original Famicom version actually went by a password system, but since the game took forever to make it to the United States, a crazy invention called the save battery was becoming more commonplace in longer games like this. On the NES, they're often acknowledged by a golden label on the back of the cartridge. After you exit the town areas, you run into monsters, and the game is turn-based, one of the first of its kinds, and the battle system works perfectly fine, but you have options just for attacking as well as running, using items, or using spells. As you level up more, you'll get more various kinds of spells that'll assist you throughout. Now, there is one thing that you primarily do in this game, and it's not going on quests for dragons. There's surprisingly very little of that. The game is grinding. A lot of grinding. Now, this is an early JRPG, so it's kind of to be expected, but if you want to play this game, you need to be prepared to grind for a solid 90% of the time when you're playing. Obviously, you need to get to higher levels, but you also need to grind for gold, which you can use to buy upgrades for your weapons and armor and whatnot, like I previously mentioned. I should also add that these monsters are just iconic. I mean, I'm sure anybody who's into gaming has seen slimes all over the place in terms of merchandising, artwork, all that. If you go to a convention, you're going to see slime plushies all over the place. They're truly a staple of the RPG genre, and every enemy in this game is super memorable and charming, which is a good thing, because you'll be seeing these enemies until the end of time. You sort of have to hang out in designated areas grinding to certain levels before going further, because unfortunately if you get knocked out, you lose 50% of your gold no matter how much you have, no matter what. Normally in another RPG I wouldn't really be fazed by this, but since you absolutely need to upgrade your weaponry and all that to stand a chance in this game, you need to hang on to every single piece of gold you get. You just gotta grind until you get a copper sword, a small shield, and some leather armor. Yeah, that leather armor is totally gonna protect you from all these monsters. At this point, you should have 2 spells or so. Heal, which definitely comes in handy when you're grinding, so you don't have to go back and forth between nearby towns blowing all your money on inns non-stop. And Hurt, which in my experience was not helpful at all during my entire playthrough. It always seemed to do as much, and sometimes even less damage than the regular attack, and the regular attack doesn't even waste MP, which is magic power that you have a limited amount of to use these spells with. So not long after you grind for the first time, you gotta go into a cave, and this is something I should address from the get-go because I'm gonna mention it a lot. This game's kinda cryptic. I think I get why Nintendo Power literally gave this game away, because you need a Nintendo Power to beat the thing. So you go into the cave known as Erdrick's Cave, your ancestor's cave, I suppose. Remember before going here that you should probably buy a torch or two because it's very dark, and otherwise you're going to be banging into walls a lot. All you really get from here is a tablet from Erdrick which tells you to fight the bad guy, just in case it wasn't a given already in the game. And then after that you can go a little further west to a town called Garenham. I'm probably mispronouncing that as well. So you can window shop for items that you're nowhere near wealthy enough to afford. I wasn't kidding about grinding hard for gold. After you spend tons of time grinding for gold, you probably aren't like me wandering to more dangerous areas out of curiosity, further prolonging the events. You save up to buy a hand axe, which is better than a copper sword at least, and you get some chainmail. So not long after that, you have to go to the opposite northern side of the map to a town that's known as Cole. Thankfully I can actually pronounce that. Here's where you'll find even better armor. You grind and grind to get the half plate, and eventually you can get the full plate, which costs a whopping 3,000 gold. After acquiring the half plate and a better shield, a good idea is to go to this cave out west, which is in an area where I was grinding a lot, and get the fighter's ring. I don't think the fighter's ring is really necessary to beat the game, but it does slightly boost your stats, which take all the stat boosts that you can get. And the next stop is Rimuldar. I don't know how to pronounce that, but you get there by going to this cave that's across a swamp in the south that hurts you when you walk through it for the time being. You go through the cave straight down, and thankfully at this point you should have a spell called Radiant, which is an absolute godsend for these caves. They light up the room, and better than torches at that. In this next town you have to, get this, upgrade your armor and weapon again. You can also get magic keys in this town, which are one-time use keys that unlock a variety of doors, so it's definitely useful to have a few of these on hand, and you'll eventually need them. However, while the sword is a minuscule $1,500, the magic armor is $7,700. Oh my goodness, I have a lot of grinding to do, and at least the magic armor is sweet and it recovers HP every few steps, and also lets you walk through the swamps I was just in without taking damage. At this point also, weaker enemies will start to run away from you, like they'll see you and try to attack, and then they'll realize that you're at a super high level and be like, crap, I gotta get away from this dude. Thankfully, you'll need to grind a lot to be powerful enough for your next quest anyway, so once you've upgraded your sword and armor, you gotta roll back into that cave you were just in and fight a green dragon. The green dragon was a major pain for me to do, even at the recommended level that the walkthrough said I should have been at, and since I'd blown all my money on magic armor anyway, I just figured I'd keep going back to it over and over again, constantly getting killed until I eventually got lucky and got a critical hit on the stupid thing. Its defense is higher as well, so while I'm doing 50 damages to blue slimes which have 3 HP at this point, this dragon is taking damage sometimes in the single digits. It was pretty defeating, but after beating him, you finally rescue Princess Gwaelin and take her back to the castle. And after you're back, the king thanks you, and Princess Gwaelin determines that she's in love with you, even though you don't even actually know each other. But at least her love comes in handy in the form of an item that'll tell you how much experience you need for the next level, and another feature that I'll bring up a little bit later. After this is more cryptic stuff. Yeah, seriously, I wasn't kidding. Unless you played this game an absurd amount and analyzed every word every NPC said, how is anybody actually supposed to figure this out? Your next goal is to go to Garin's grave, which is in Garinham, and navigate to find a silver harp, but in order to get to the grave, you have to walk through a very specific part of a wall inside of a building, and then go back to the grave. So I proceeded to pour one out for Garin, and I found a silver harp, which you can proceed to go to a very hidden area in the mountains to trade it for the Staff of Rain, which you will need to beat the game. In addition to the Staff of Rain, you need to also acquire a Stone of Sunlight, which actually can be found in the castle where you began the game and have been saving this entire time. You have to use magic keys to get to it, and you have to go around to the back of the castle to find a stairway. Use the stairs button, and then go in to get the stone. By the way, another really oddly hidden thing. Like, sure, they hint at this, as well as every other secret in the game, but wow. Before the next town, you need to, well, I'll let you take a guess. If you guess level up and grind for gold, then you are absolutely correct. At this point, leveling up takes a while, but you'll need to do as much grinding as you can anyway, due to the fact that the next town you're in, you need to get a shield and a flame sword that together cost 23,000 gold. Yeah, I'm not kidding, it's quite a grind and it takes a while to do. However, be prepared, because the town that you make this extravagant purchase in has a very big scary golem protecting it, and on top of that, the route on the way to it has a lot of very powerful monsters that are probably best to just run away from. You have a repel spell at this point, but it only works when it feels like it, aka when the enemies aren't super strong. Oh well, I finally made it without being void of health. Thankfully you have the fairy flute to put the golem to sleep, and you can just wail on him at that point. However, you only need this sword very briefly, as the next thing you do is upgrade your armor and weapon for the final time. And by the way, the weapon dealer who sells these, despite being open, has their door locked, so you have to hunt down a magic key to even do business with this fellow. Thanks, asshole. Every vendor in Caitlin is incompetent, apparently. This other guy, you have to unlock his door, but I don't even know what he deals in because he runs away from the counter and I got sick of waiting for him. But first things first, there's an abandoned town that you probably should have avoided. I didn't avoid it at one point, I lost a ton of gold for that mistake, but at a higher level it's definitely more manageable. After all, you only really need to go to this one very specific random spot in the middle of the town where you fight this boss in the form of an axe knight. He's not too bad, but you gotta make sure to use a spell that in my entire playthrough I only used in this fight called Stop Spell, which stops spells. I say this because this thing can put you to sleep and ruin your entire day. After that fight is done, you search the ground and then you find Erdrick's armor. Make sure you actually search the ground or else you aren't going to get it. Thankfully it equips it right away. Another example of very random placement. This armor is similarly to the magic armor, capable of recovering HP, only more frequently, and in addition to being immune to swamps, you can walk on the magic floors, which, while they're very uncommon in the day, they will absolutely destroy you if you walk on them without this armor. Oh, but if that isn't mysterious enough, this next item puts the icing on the cake. In order to get to the final castle, where the boss and the final sword are, you need this token of Erdrick. Where is it? It's in a very random spot in the middle of the swamp down south. Now, a fellow in Caitlin, a town where you blew all your money on a shield and a sword, does tell you where this is, but even then, it was still a lot to take in. As I mentioned earlier about Princess Gwaelin's love, I mentioned that it also has a simultaneous purpose. In addition to telling you how much you need to grind for the next level, it also states how far you are from the castle that she resides. This is the only time where this is particularly useful, but man, this is something else. You need to be on a very specific tile in the middle of the swamp at 70 leagues south and 40 leagues east. Search the ground and voila, you have the token. Yeah, that's great. So after that, you gotta go south of Rheingoldar, which I'm never gonna pronounce that correctly, I'm sorry. The town that was south of the swamp cave. You find an old guy who combines the token, the water sap, and the stone of sunlight to create a rainbow drop, which allows you to create a bridge west of Rhymgoldar to get to the final castle, in addition to showing you some very pretty colors. Within this final castle, before you actually try to beat the game, you can also acquire Erdrick's sword, which is the strongest sword of the game. To get to the sword and to the final boss, you have to find this super secret staircase behind the throne. Thank goodness there isn't some mysteriously hidden Erdrick shield though, which is good because I would be pretty pissed if I dished out 14 grand on a shield to have to get rid of it a half hour later. After that, exit the castle because those enemies will just destroy you. So from there, you just gotta grind more and more. I'd say level 20 is a pretty safe number to aim for. The higher the better though, but at least you don't have to spend any more money, so if you die, it's not really a big deal. And finally, you are ready to fight the Dragon Lord. Honestly, the most difficult part of this final part is the RNG on the way. No doubt you're gonna run into a lot of enemies, strong enemies at that, but for the best chance with Dragon Lord, you're gonna have to run away from all the enemies that you see. Sometimes, however, that's easier said than done, and they just don't let you run away, especially these stupid dragons. Hate them. But then you meet the Dragon Lord once you traverse the castle. He's a very goofy looking fellow with a very bizarre hairstyle. He asks you if you'd like to join him in the evil side, but I'm a good being, so I'm not going to do that. And honestly, he's pretty easy to beat, but that isn't his final form. He transforms into this large dragon, which has a lot more power, and basically the reason it's ideal to run from enemies on the way is so they have as much MP as possible, because oh boy, you are going to need it. You need to get into the groove, damaging him, and using a spell that you acquire at a pretty high level called Heal More, which is the heal spell that you got earlier, but more. It's super useful and almost fully replenishes your HP. Unfortunately, your hits only do like 10 damage each if you're lucky, so you have to do this repetitive cycle of hitting and healing as you get low in health until he's dead. That said, it wasn't really that bad. I think I took 2 tries to take him down. Following the final showdown, you discover a ball of light that illuminates the land and all peace is restored. You return to the castle where you started and the king offers you the role of king of the land, and geez dude, that's kind of a lot of responsibility. Gwaelin then asks me if she can join me in my travels, to which I agree, but I feel like she's gonna get sick of me and my antics and banter about the 3DO real fast. The game then says that the tale has come to an end, unless the dragons return again. I wonder if this game saw a sequel. Dragon Warrior, I mean, it's cryptic, it's confusing, it's janky, it's tedious, but I love it. It's a great game. It's very primitive, and you kinda gotta give it a break for being such an early entry. And with that said, I feel it should also be worth mentioning that while I haven't played it, the game was remade and ported to the Super Famicom and then later on to the Game Boy Color, and presumably they probably fixed a lot of the grievances I had with this game, and I look forward to going further. But how about the greatest NES RPG of all time? Lunar Pool, where you get to play the role of a guy on the moon who's playing pool. What more could he ask for?